not just having somebody being like, patriarchy, yep. Yep, good morning, we're here. You good? Did you puzzle hunt? I went to puzzle hunt and then I just was like, I'm old, I think I need a drink. So I also just wanted to offer up to all of you a chance to win. You're welcome. So it was good, it was fun, we have a big day. I'm very excited about today. A lot of people who work and actually play fields, people who are just doing all kinds of really cool stuff. And you guys, thank you so much for like being here on time and taking it seriously. Give yourselves a round of applause. I know, that first night drinking enthusiasm, getting to know people, staying out later than you should thing happened, and then you made it here, so I'm very proud of you, and also slightly condescending. But I feel like it's okay, because we're friends. I love that we're kicking off the day with somebody who is a storyteller and a musician who, like, when people take their life work and bravely talk about it through their art, warts and all, it's pretty amazing. And it's the most authentic way, I think, to do the work. And I feel like it's a perfect way to kick off day 2. So this first person coming to the stage, he comes by way of Durham. I think he was born and raised in Baltimore. He is a rapper, producer, songwriter, and through literally an accumulation of his life, has created a body of work that is full of self-reflection, anger, and confidence. And those are the 3 things that excite me the most and captivate me the most. He's performed alongside Danny Brown and Meek Mill, and he's here for you. Please welcome Professor Tune!
Good morning, everybody. Everybody stand up for me. Stand up, stand up. No, keep that rolling. Keep that music going. Keep it going. Keep going. Gucci gang, 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 yeah. Everybody put your hands up in the sky. It's early. It's early. Let's wake up. Turn up. Hey, turn up. Hey. Hey. All right, we can cut it. We can cut it. We can cut it. We can cut it. How's everybody doing this morning? Woo! Everybody's doing fine. Nobody was like, I'm kind of sleepy. I'm hungover. Y'all starting the morning off lying to me. My name is Professor Tune. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. I decided to start the morning off with as much ratchetness as possible. So I made sure that we played Gucci Gang first. Gucci Gang is pretty lit. It's by an artist named Lil Pump. If you don't listen to trap music, then don't listen to Lil Pump. Because that's not where you want to start. Lil Pump. Bro, I ain't never had shit. And as I continue not to have, on my bras they fill their closet with shopping bags. And every rapper that tests me leaving a body bag on the quest of my daughter have everything that I never had. CJ said numbers never lie. Should have told it to my pops on sibling number 5. Cause real men never cry. Roger died from overeating. Didn't listen when mama said I was overfeeding. Jordan almost didn't play for Chicago either. And I swear I almost never play with my Peters. He almost really don't count, because now I change your demeanor. Are you getting my rondo? That's the point if you missing mentions. And why the fuck this skinny nigga could never listen? Tired of penny pinching me, why the fuck I ain't rich yet? Cause my flow been nasty. Hood stripper fishnets, look nigga this that. Same feeling that I got. Fighting step pops, and I was only opt. And he was 35, man, how am I still alive? There really must be a God. Well, where the fuck must pops at? Huh? Where the fuck you at? My shoes wouldn't stay tied. The advice when I couldn't keep a steady job. With some guidance with a big hill of rappers. I was chasing at the buckets, waiting for you in the rafters. Cause I didn't know my talents. Dog, I didn't know your middle name. I think my mama said that shit was Alex. Asinine class clown. Used to lay his head down in the middle of the lessons until the last bell sound. Fighting for attention didn't last 12 rounds. Wanna do you look in mirrors just to face yourself now. Just in case you hear me now, the rent still due. Your grandchild cool. Mama back in school ain't talked to Pop-Pop in weeks. So if you go check on him, text a nigga at least. And if you wrote the kid a letter, that'll give me peace. A few calls in the coming weeks, like your son a beast. Man, where the fuck was my pops at? My name is Professor Tune. That is a story that I wrote probably about 3 or 4. Don't quote me on the time frame. I wrote it one day. But that is a little bit of who I am in a quick verse. It's a little bit more than a 16, but we would call that a 16. That's what rappers call a verse. and that is who I am, and that's one of the pillars that we're going to stand on this morning. In hip-hop, there are 5 pillars. I'm not going to preach about those right now. Ask me about them later. But we're going to stand on 5 pillars, and the first one is who. Who you are, who you play with. I choose to play with my mentors. I got super lucky in Durham, North Carolina. Just a little bit about me. I dropped out of high school, and I dropped out of college. I went back to high school eventually. But I didn't go and get a formal education, but through the people I played with, I ended up getting doused into this startup world. Google moved into Durham, GFE, Google for Entrepreneurs, they started funding things, and through play with my mentors, who I got super lucky, and my mentor is a 58-year-old white woman. Yes. My biggest mentor so far has been Casey Steinbacher. She's the former CEO of the Durham Chamber of Commerce. That woman has taught me everything I know almost about business. One of my other mentors is actually here and spoke to you guys, Salim Reshamwala. Multimedia guy, has worked for, y'all heard everything he did yesterday. One of my other mentors, Chris Hively, guy who started and sold MapQuest to like AOL for like $1 bajillion with 5 other dudes. But those people look nothing like me. They do nothing that I do. And that's the next pillar, is what. It's the who, it's the what. What you do does not fucking matter. It does not. When you're in this space, when you're around all these people, what you do doesn't necessarily matter. Who you play with is important. It's your network, blah, blah. And what you do is your job, and you go to work, blah, blah. But what you do isn't necessarily important when you're mingling with people, you're touching other people's lives, you're influencing them. So what you do doesn't matter to you or them, but what they do absolutely matters to you and them. You get it? Y'all with me? You sure? Yeah. All right. When you do those things that don't matter, you do them all the time. Right? Whenever you're playing, whenever you're working, you're still influencing people. You got to remember that all the time, every fucking second of your life. I have a 5-year-old. I'm a father. When I'm at work, am I not a father? What? Somebody said no. No, I am a father. I'm that dude all the time. You're a journalist. When you go home, you're asleep. You're a sleeper. But you're also still a journalist all the time. Where? Everywhere. Wherever you go. When are you you? You are you all the time and everywhere. So what we got so far is who, what, when, where, and why. Why do we do this? Whatever it is that you do. Do you do it because it makes you feel good? You want to pat yourself on the back like, you wrote a good story, bro. That song was dope as shit, bro. You touched my life. Patting yourself on the back. No. You do it because the answer is simple as fuck. To live. That's why you do it. You wake up every morning to live. You go to work to live. It's called making a living. You do it to live. And that answer is the simplest answer that you can do. I know my subject was supposed to be follow the paper, and I was going to come up here and give you a speech about how the entertainment industry follows influxes in economic development. And that's all cool, give you a bunch of bullshit stats about this and that. If you really want to be serious, entertainment industry boomed really around the drug trade, but we're not going to get to that part. I can give you the whole disco storyline. I don't even have to use hip hop. But I decided to change it up because I had an opportunity to keep it simple. SAF, simple as fuck. You should text that to like your best friend and be like, bro, keep it simple as fuck this morning. The answer is simple. Live, L-I-V-E. You wake up every morning to live. I rap to live. I gotta feed my kid. I got family members who depend on me for certain things. I depend on music myself. Therapeutic release, get the anger out. I can't just walk around slapping fools in the face. I'm mad, bah! That's a charge, especially since I wear black hoodies all the time and I look like this. But it's to live. This is how I make my living, speaking and sharing my story with everyone. People look like you, also young, raging, dreadhead, twisted up dudes in the middle of the club who like to mosh. It doesn't matter how we look. It doesn't matter what we do at all. It does not matter. I'm a rapper. My background may not look like anybody else's background in this room, but we're all in the same room. And that should speak to the simplicity of we're all just living. We all have something to learn from each other, and it's through living life. Our experiences come to us through life, through living. The answer is fucking simple. It's simple as fuck. If you do one thing when you leave here today, you're going to live, right? And that's all you have to do. Live positive, play positive, mix, mingle, be diverse, not by shades of crayons and shit. Be diverse in thought. Be diverse in the people that you hang around and the way that they think. If you're gonna hang with your mentors, you gotta hang with your homies who turn up too. Mix that room full of people and be intentional about it. Because if I just hang with all my homies, then probably all just gonna make ratchet rap songs about money and drugs and turn up and sip lean or whatever rappers do these days. If I hang with my mentors, then we're gonna sit and they're gonna coach me on how to pitch and raise funds and get money for festivals that I help with and shit like that. And that can get boring all fucking day. But if I mix the homies and the mentors and the peers, especially the peers, a lot of people want to network up. So even when you play, you want to be like, oh, I want to play with people who got more money than I do. I want to play up. Instead of playing across the board, because there are way more peers than there are big homies, right? You never know the connection that you're going to get going across the board. And that connection is made by doing one thing. Keeping it simple, contacting somebody and be like, hey, let's go do something, let's live. My name is Professor Toon, and I hope you got one thing from me today. Keep it simple as...
Oh my God, thank you. Keep it simple as fuck. It's my new favorite thing. Oh my God. You know, also, I just have to say, in taking it one step further, this is why I love coming to this conference, because it's the researchers' information that we take in, and then we read what you write, and then we can make it simple as fuck for other people. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The credibility of making it simple as fuck from people who are smart and bring knowledge is equally as fun and important. All right, so as we continue the theme of keeping it simple as fuck, which I'm super excited, I'm just going to say it all the time. It makes me really happy. The next speaker coming to the stage, international speaker from Montreal. How about a hand for Canada? Canada in the house. He started his career as a wee lad, as a campaign manager at Adbusters. I love Adbusters. Now he is spending all of his time studying how advocacy campaigns happen, how to make them grow, and how to make them really effective for social change. So please welcome to the stage, Tom Latches.
So thanks, Liz, and thanks, Frank Gathering, for flying me down from the frozen wasteland that is Canada, where Canadians are thinking about you, our progressive friends here in the U.S., with a fair amount of concern since the election. But I have hope, because I'm working week in and week out with folks campaigning for social justice and fighting to make the U.S. a better place. And I know there's a lot of work to do these days, but I am so inspired by the amount of mobilization and energy that has just happened in the past year. Seriously, I mean, mountains have been moved here. And I mean, that being said, like, we can definitely use more power for the progressive advocacy sector to get the job done even more in 2018. So, allow me to share my geeky passion with you here, and I hope that it will be part of the puzzle for building more progressive power this year, here in the US, but also across the world. So for the past 20-odd years, my focus in my career has been on how digital and networked culture changes the way that social change campaigning happens. And I'm particularly obsessed with how campaign innovation happens. Because right now there's some like upstarts and early adopters like 350.org, like Indivisible since the election, like Movimiento Cosecha fighting for DACA, that are really ramping up fast, scaling really efficiently, and kicking some serious butt. But there's also a lot of other groups and other causes that are just as worthy, where they haven't quite figured out how to move so fast and how to kick as much butt. So the question is, how can we spread campaign innovation more evenly throughout the progressive advocacy sector? So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories of how I've observed campaign innovation happening across the world. So despite its clunky name, this campaign is really quite amazing. The Support Don't Punish campaign is a campaign that fights for better drug policies, more humane drug policies across the world, which is really like the direct opposite of the war on drugs, which some world leaders still think is a good idea. But anyways, from a campaign geek perspective, here's what I think is really cool about this campaign. Last year, they managed to pull off actions in over 200 cities across the world. And this campaign is only 5 years old, so it's gone from 0 cities to over 200 cities in just 5 years, which is already pretty impressive. And those events across the world, they're all run through distributed organizing, which means that central staff set up a digital toolkit, they give some support through communications, but really local leaders, volunteers and supporters pick up the stuff and totally organize their local events and run the show locally in their cities across the world, which is innovative and super efficient. And just to show you how efficient that is, the central staff that are managing this network of over 200 cities participating, those are just 5 people. 5 people based in London that run the whole show. And those 5 people are not crackerjack campaigners or like high-flying consultants that were flown in to do this thing. They're like young policy wonks, you know, working for the International Drug Policy Consortium. So how did those young policy wonks like pull off such an amazing campaign? So I spoke to Jamie Bridge, one of the organizers there, and he told me that they based the campaign after having seen the Robin Hood tax campaign roll out across the UK. And for those who haven't heard of it, the Robin Hood tax campaign was kind of like a UK offshoot of Occupy. It was a campaign to fight the financial sector excesses. And it was also set up and run through distributed organizing. The campaign idea was offered through a website and spread around, but people would basically take the idea and set up their local events across the UK. And it was very successful. So the International Drug Policy folks looked at that campaign and basically modeled their Support Don't Punish campaign on the Robin Hood tax campaign, which is cool but really not as easy as it sounds, because this is like reverse engineering something where you look at a model that's out there, you figure out exactly how it works, you break down the pieces, and then you're confident enough to build out a whole new campaign. You're confident enough that you've got the recipe right to build a real campaign and deploy it into the world with resources. So that takes an enormous amount of guts and really is not something that most campaigners in other groups around the world are ready to do. So I'll give you another story, the Stop Adani campaign, which is, in my view, like an example of forward engineering. So building a campaign based on a model drawn from best practices, but that has already been put together. So it's really one step easier than what Support Don't Punish did. So the backstory here is that in 2016, my colleague Jason Mogus and I, we did research into what made over 50 of the world's top advocacy campaigns successful. So a lot of these campaigns were in the US, but some from around the world. Because they were successful, we wanted to break them down and see if there were any common practices or common strategies that lay behind these campaigns to try to like surface a recipe that could be used by other advocacy campaigners to build new campaigns. So the result of all this research was that yes, we did find a common pattern, and that pattern was broken down into 4 principles. So the short version of that is that all of these successful campaigns opened up to people power and let their supporters lead and take on more responsibilities, like distributed organizing, like the distributed organizing model I talked about. They were also like often groups that worked across networks and across movements to build synergy around their causes. And then there were 2 centrally planned areas that most campaigns shared strengths in. One was really good cause framing and storytelling, and then running a tight ship and doing a lot of testing and data-based, campaign performance stuff and checking out, how you're doing and adapting on the fly. So those were the common elements to the successful campaigns, and we broke it down into this report. And then we took this report on the road and presented it at different places. And Jason went to the 2016 Netroots Nation conference here in the US. And in the crowd were some Australians who listened to the panel on the report and the directed network campaigning model. And they said, that is what we need to build our new climate campaign on. A campaign to stop the world's biggest new planned coal project in Australia. And so Jason was basically invited to join their campaign design team, and together they built out this new campaign based on this model that had been extracted from all of these, successful campaigns. And a year since the Stop Adani campaign is launched, it's really become quite a powerful campaign. In fact, you could say it's like Australia's most powerful advocacy campaign at the moment. There are groups all over the country starting up local actions. NGOs are involved and are amplifying everything. And there's an explosion of creative energy happening. And most importantly, all this people power leveraged by the Stop Adani campaign has actually changed the politics around the mine, which used to be kind of a done deal because Australia is like a fan of coal like Trump. But now it's like the project is actually in danger thanks to this campaign. So that's cool. But just pulling back to campaign innovation, what can we learn from the Stop Adani campaign and the Support Don't Punish campaign? Well, my view is that those campaigns, they both based their campaign design on the successful practices of a previous campaign or several campaigns that had rolled out in real life. So these models based on successful best practices, I like to call them blueprints because they're kind of like a rough architecture that's solid enough because it's based on stuff that worked out there in the world, but it's also open enough to accommodate, adaptation and change. And it would be great if we could release more blueprints like this out into the world. So as it happens, I'm working with a group of awesome campaigners, some folks from ACLU and Indivisible here in the US, but folks from Canada and Australia and the UK. And we are working together. We live on Google Docs. We're putting together best practices and seeking what campaigners want answered and trying to build out blueprints to help accelerate social change. So those of you who are interested in this, I'd love to see you in the Dissect session I do afterwards, where I'll dig into this further. And thanks, Frank, for giving me a chance to geek out with you all, and look forward to one-on-one conversations the next couple of days.
That's amazing. Tom Latches. Okay, right now, so it begins the first of our 3 finalists who will be having, I know, it's exciting, right? I know. So as we told you yesterday, throughout the course of today, Annie and Troy are going to interview all 3 of our Frank Prize finalists for Annie's podcast called 7 Minutes in Heaven with a Scientist. So without further ado, I'm going to bring out our bedazzled wonderkins and start the process. So Annie and Troy, come on out. No pressure, but you're going to nail it.
We're totally in.
I'm really proud of you. And your jackets are just...
These?
What?
You mean these?
Yeah, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
We were supposed to pose
It's
together.
good.
Oh, we were supposed to pose.
You didn't pose, and then...
okay, I'm sorry.
How are you feeling? Good morning. Are you awake? Are you still drunk? I know some of you are, because I saw you this morning, and you were definitely drunk. So today we are going to interview all of our prize finalists for a live taping of our podcast, 7 Minutes in Heaven with a Scientist, because everyone is a little bit curious, right? A little sci-curious, as Anne Cristiano calls it. So let me give you a backstory on 7 Minutes in Heaven in case you're like, what the hell is this? These scientists agreed to do this? So one day, a couple years ago, Anne Cristiano and Lauren Griffin and I were sitting in Anne's office, and we were obsessing over some science, as we do every single day. And we came back to this conversation we usually come to, which is, wouldn't it be great if everyone who's working tirelessly to drive social change had access to this research and knew how to apply it? And we were like, yes, we need to get it into their hands. So we said, what if we sit down with these scientists and have one-on-one conversations and make them accessible to change makers? And because we're Frank, we're like, let's do it in a closet and record it, because we don't do anything normal here at Frank. So thus was born 7 Minutes in Heaven with a Scientist, where we spend 7-ish intimate minutes in heaven with your new favorite researcher, or we like to say research crush, the brains behind your latest research obsession. So today we will meet some of those scientists who you will soon be stalking their Google Scholar page, just like the rest of us.
And it's absolutely a wonderful experience for our scientists to do this or be here. Last night it was 9:30 p.m. and I'm talking, and I'm in that scientific mode where I'm just apologizing to the person talking. I'm like, sorry, I'll stop. I promise I'll only tell you one more fact and one more nuance. And they're like, no, keep going on and on and on. And so many scientists like me have seen our favorite scientists get on things like the Today Show, be on it for so long and say one thing of interest. And we think, no, the science is so much more flexible, it's so much more practical, it's so much more nuanced. And so to have a program here like this and to have people talk, and as Annie says, let's get deep real quick and get to that, is just absolutely fantastic to see the science communicated that way and really exploring the nuances and power of it. So yeah. I'm very excited to be here, and I know all of our 3 finalists are very excited to be here too.
So are you ready for the first recording of 7 Minutes in Heaven with a Scientist? Yes?
Ready?
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Round 1!
right, so we're here with our first prize finalist, Chelsea Shine from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
All right, Chelsea, we're gonna get deep real quick, if that's okay with you.
Great.
So, as we were preparing for this interview, you shared a really formative story with us that really was the basis for your passion. Can you share that story with everybody?
Sure.
here?
So my interest in moral psychology started back when I was in high school. So when I was 16, my twin sister and I worked in a summer camp in Ashkelon, Israel. And one thing I noticed on the first day of camp was this constant thud in the background. And this was in 2006, and we were working 8 miles north of the Gaza Strip, so this thud wasn't construction, it was rockets landing in the Gaza Strip. And sensing my shock, one of the parents of my campers told me that as long as the noises were going in the opposite direction, there was nothing to worry about. And as the camp days went along, I became desensitized to the noises. But that was until one of the rockets landed 2 blocks away from where we were. And another rocket landed the next day. And suddenly I couldn't quite avoid this growing feeling of moral hypocrisy. I couldn't quite understand why I thought it was totally okay when the noises were far away and the suffering of other kids didn't matter, but suddenly when it was kids I knew and kids I saw, I had an immense amount of moral concern. And so that experience launched me on a path of studying our moral minds, of trying to understand why it is we feel an immense amount of moral concern towards some people and are kind of numb to the experiences of others.
And so how did this experience lead into the questions you answer as a researcher?
Yeah, so the broad questions I ask as a researcher is who do we consider as part of our moral communities and whose interests do we kind of ignore, and what leads us to feel a sense of moral outrage and to feel a sense of caring about others.
And so let's talk about your specific research you're sharing with us today, which is challenging things in the field of psychology and clarifying it at the same time, which is wonderful.
Sure, so one of the questions I asked in this particular paper is whether or not liberals and conservatives are fundamentally different when it comes to our moral values. And the consensus in the field when I started was that actually liberals and conservatives have fundamentally different moral mechanisms. And that kind of makes some sense. We just look at the news and it seems like we're fundamentally divided. But the question I want to ask is there something that unifies these two processes? Is it possible that even though our moral decisions and judgments are different, the underlying psychological mechanisms can be shared? And the reasons I thought this is if you think of an issue such as gun rights. While liberals might view their position as protecting children, conservatives hold their position for the same reasons, for protecting children. So what I did in a series of 7 experiments is I looked at whether or not liberals and conservatives both ground their moral experiences and moral judgments in perceptions of harm, but they just see harm and see who they care and concern about in different locations. So let me give you one example. So raise your hand if you believe it is harmful to kick a dog. Okay, keep your hands up if you believe that's immoral. So there's a perfect 1-0 correlation, a correspondence between perceptions of harm and immorality in this case. Now, raise your hand if you believe it's immoral to burn an American flag. So this audience is, so some hands, not my standard audience response, that's cool. Keep your hands up if you believe that burning a flag is both harmful and immoral. So usually what happens when I ask this question is that the same people who view an act as immoral also view it as harmful. When many of us in this room are liberal, though, we don't necessarily see that harm. In a set of follow-up studies, what I want to know is if this appeal to harm is just this like evil manipulation of other people's ideas or if it was genuinely held. So what I had people do is I had people answer these questions as quickly as they could, and that prevented them from engaging in this rationalization. And what we found across all those 7 studies is that people automatically perceive harm where they see immorality. And this isn't just this effortful process, this is a genuine perception of harm. People genuinely believed that when they saw an act as immoral, it caused harm, most notably to children.
So are you saying on a gut emotional level, everybody is reacting to information and making judgments on a perception of harm.
Absolutely.
So what does this mean then for the people in the room who are working on issues where different stakeholders or communities see harm in different ways?
Sure, so I think there's 2 points that we should keep in mind. The first is that harm is a matter of perception. So things that seem very obvious to us might not be for others. So if we're talking about reproductive rights, many of us in the room don't see a fetus at 20 weeks as capable of experiencing pain. But the narrative is very different for people who believe abortion is immoral. And just outright discounting that, while we know the scientific facts are in that favor, isn't necessarily getting at people's gut feelings. Mm-hmm. The second point that I think is helpful to keep in mind is that both liberals and conservatives have moral reasons for their beliefs. So moral opponents aren't fundamentally evil. And that's a really tough thing to keep in mind, especially when we view opposing views as inherently harmful themselves.
Amen.
Yeah. And so,
Damn.
And so that's for the policy people. So just after everybody sort of encounters your research, what's one thing you'd like them to do that's different?
I'd like them to stop and listen. And that's not easy, again, especially when someone holds an opinion that we think itself is inherently harmful. So if I'm talking to someone who believes that gay marriage is immoral, I believe that position itself is dangerous. So it takes everything in me to recognize that this person is also grounding their beliefs in morality, at least at times. I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but at least some of those people, at least the neighbors I have in North Carolina, do have these genuine perceptions that are driving their beliefs.
So it's really, we need to be empathetic with the different communities we're trying to influence and really get to know where they're perceiving harm in order to truly communicate with them in a way that's not threatening to how they see the world.
Absolutely.
Wow. So what are you working on next?
Sure, so in my dissertation, I'm trying to use the knowledge I had from this previous paper to try to bridge some of these political divides. So I'm trying to see, can we get liberals and conservatives to dehumanize each other less? And can we get them to just simply listen to each other? And one way I'm trying to do this is just to appeal to kind of shared moral values first. So before we have a conversation on these really difficult topics, let's first sit down in a room and talk about 3 similarities we have. Let's talk about how we both really care about strengthening our communities. Then we can jump into the difficult parts. Then we can recognize that the other person cares about our community as well. And then we can launch a stronger dialogue, even in these really contentious issues.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Chelsea Shine, everybody. Fantastic. So I hope you have a bunch of questions written down. Tomorrow we're going to have an open Q&A, so you can save those questions for then. If not, you can also go pick her brain. She'll be around all day long. And we'll see you later today with more 7 Minutes in Heaven with a Scientist. Thank you.
That was fascinating.
I know.
I have a really hard time with trying to find morality in certain people. But I'm not a researcher. I just sometimes don't get it. I mean, when Michelle Obama goes high, I just go lower. I just like, I'm a comic. I'm trained to just go low, like really low. Super low. If you want to see how low I can go, tonight is the night. So, I'm restrained, believe it or not. This is me being restrained. All right. I know. Thank you for co-signing on that, Amy. I'm really excited for our next speaker. Have you seen the Truth Initiative work? I love people who are just righteous and amazing when it comes to kicking ass on big, giant people who may be doing big, giant harm to people. And the Truth Initiative literally just goes balls out in their messaging, in their video, and calls out big tobacco, and then also calls out people using it in a way that makes sense and hopefully helps people reevaluate how they are literally supporting the tobacco industry. So please welcome the one and only Eric Ashe, who is the CMO of the Truth Initiative.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was an awesome introduction. Thank you.
I realize that looked shameless, but a really quick story. I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a not yet 2-year-old, all boys. I drink lots of coffee. And my 5-year-old was like, so Daddy, what are you doing today? And they're still at the age where they actually ask me what I do. You can imagine it's extremely complicated to tell them what I do. I basically say I make ads, which puts me in a really bad category because that always interrupts their cartoon watching. But what they basically said was, I told him I was doing this, and he said, oh, you have circle time today. And isn't that awesome? He said, can you please get a video so I can see your classmates? And so, thank you for being my classmates today. Oh crap, we started the timer. Okay, so real quickly, a couple of ground rules. You will be tempted, because this happens to me a lot, that as I talk about the Truth Campaign and the scope and the scale to say, that's not applicable to me. You have a lot of money, you have this big platform, it's not applicable. I challenge you not to do that. Please don't do that. Lean forward, because it's really a question of scale. The techniques, the strategy, the insights, the discipline, the rigor, all of that you can apply to what you're doing. It's just a matter of scale. Number two, I talk like a marketer because guilty as charged, I'm a marketer, right? You are too. Whether you are a practitioner or fill in the blank what role you play, you are competing for market share. You may not think that way right now. You may not talk that way right now. You may not be selling a product, but if you're trying to get someone's attention, you're competing for market share. You are. So think like that. I get up every day and try to take the posture that no one gives a rip about truth. There's no 18-year-old in America sitting on the edge of their couch saying, my life would be complete with another truth campaign. It's not true. And so I have to enter the conversation assuming I don't have permission to talk to them. And I have to earn their trust. You need to do the exact same thing. So real quickly, safe to assume by the hand claps you guys know who we are. We were founded out of a big fight. That's important because we're fighters. And as much as I'd like to say I'm a lover, I'm also a fighter. So this is a photograph, a really famous photograph of the tobacco executives standing before Congress saying, smoking doesn't cause cancer. It's addictive. It's addictive? Shocking. They lied, right? And they got called on the carpet and they had to pay a ton of money. In my opinion, not enough money for what they did. How do you put a price tag on wrecking communities for decades? But they paid out a lot of money. That money went to the states largely. So every state that was part of this big settlement, and they were basically making amends for the undue healthcare costs that the states had to take on as a result of this lie, perpetrating this lie. And then a portion of the money went aside to an organization, us, to focus on public education, primarily around young adults and youth, to ensure that this fraud didn't happen again, that we educated people so they didn't fall prey to the tactics of the tobacco industry. So I'm telling you our story in 3 acts. It's extremely ambitious. I'm going to talk really fast because I'm already a couple minutes behind. But the first act is the longest act. It's the most important act. And I'm going to look backwards and talk about the decisions that we made, the discipline, the rigor that we went into, or that we applied in terms of understanding the audience. And it sort of sets the stage for who we are and what we're going to be doing moving forward. So first thing we did was really look at what in the world is, oh wow, you can't see that type, I'll read it for you. What is going on with the consumer? If you look at the stats, over 85% of adult smokers started before the age of 18, 85%. If you ratchet that number up to your early 20s, you virtually get every single adult. So people are making these decisions to smoke at a very, very, very young age. And we looked at the adolescent sort of time frame to say, why is this happening? Well, if you are an 18-year-old or under, I'm sorry I'm talking about you while you're in the room. But if you have one in your household, you know this to be true. You have the rational and the irrational at odds at all times. Doesn't really make sense, right? They can make these very well-informed decisions where they look like adults, and then they do this thing that just comes from id, and you're like, what's wrong with you? They're not fully developed. It's natural, right? And so we looked at why and how these actions were sort of bucketed together, and we identified what we're calling sort of these need states, and I'll read them to you because the type is kind of small. But it's this need to be independent. It's also this need to fit in, which is really interesting how those two things kind of butt up against each other. I want to be different just like all my friends. It's true. This need for self-expression, this need for respect, so important at a young age. And you think, what have you done to earn respect? You haven't done anything yet. Risk-taking, extremely important. But all of these things are sort of bucketed into, they're trying to figure out who they are. It's supernatural. It's going to happen no matter what. And those of you who are parents know the more you try to force your hand or force their hand against that, the more they are incentivized to do these things because you're challenging the very need states that are part of who they're going to be. Now, all of this goes around for this really exercise for control and or power. And so, guess what the tobacco industry did? They know this, right? They know this better than I do. And so they've exploited those need states. They use that momentum to their advantage. They co-opt culture to say, hey, we're just like you. We speak like you. If you're in an African-American neighborhood in DC, you have 10 times more tobacco ads than you do in a white neighborhood. Why is that? Why are they doing that? So for us, you can see what the tobacco industry has done for decades in terms of trying to exploit these need states. So how did the public health community respond? Well, we brought out this guy. He's awesome. C. Everett Koop, love him. But he's an adult. Hey kids, don't do cigarettes. Use the facts. Because it's a logical conversation, right? But it's not logical. If I could win your decision or youth's decision on to smoke based on the merit of the argument, I win every single time. There's nothing good that comes from it. It will kill you if you use it properly. A third of you will die from it. That's not why people make decisions. And so we had this choice. We could either do option one, which is to attack it head on and say we're going to push against all of that momentum and try to counterbalance with facts and well-meaning intentions, or we could use this to our advantage and channel the momentum. It seems fairly obvious now, but it wasn't obvious at the time. And that's what we did. So looking back, we kicked ass. I say we because I didn't do it. I stand on the shoulders of people who made some really difficult decisions early on. But we drove the smoking rate down. We were part of the effort to drive the smoking rate down from 25% to 10%. A conservative estimate from that first period of time was over 450 lives saved from not dying due to tobacco-related death and disease. And we won a whole bunch of awards. Super, super proud of that. We were called the most successful campaign, health campaign in history. No pressure, but what do you do for an encore, right? You're the best. Next. Which leads us to Act 2. It's a very short act by design. So a lot had happened. We had been successful. We drove the smoking rate down, but what else had happened? Well, the landscape had shifted drastically. I was talking to this guy, so angry, Slim Shady. But a vastly, vastly different audience, right? Super independent. The last thing you do to a Gen Xer, as an Xer, is say, hey, come join us, right? Disempowered, anti-authoritarian, your parents weren't your friends, right? You slip forward to Gen Y or Gen Z, here's where we are. The most informed, the most diverse, the most patient, the most knowledgeable, a vastly, vastly different audience. And so the landscape had shifted dramatically from us there really wasn't a tension around rebellion for this sense of power. With Gen Y, they had all the power. They were the IT people in their household. When I graduated as I'm in a mixed marriage. I'm an Xer. My wife is a millennial. And when I went to college, maybe 5% of my coursework was done in a collaborative setting. Maybe 5. It's probably closer to like 2 or 3. If you're in college now, I'm sure this is playing true at University of Florida, 50%, maybe 75% of your coursework is done in a collaborative setting. They come out wired to engage and to participate. That had a tremendous impact on a brand who was anti-authoritarian, F the man, be independent, and really playing to that independence versus the momentum now being vastly different. So here's a quick video to talk about how Act 2 came to life.
Since its beginning in 2000, Truth has had incredible success in preventing teen smoking. In 2014, teen smoking was at an all-time low, but there was still work to be done. 3,200 teens were trying their first cigarette every day. Truth reinvigorated the brand and put out a call to arms to be hyper-relevant to a new generation. The anthemic rallying cry? Finish it. And Truth demonstrated their progress as it was happening. Over the last 3 years, Truth has motivated teens to join the fight by connecting smoking to the things they care about.
Right side, right side. He's cuddling a kitten. Oh wait. Left side.
Let's take a look at some actual big tobacco documents to see what they've said about the military. Classic downscale smoker.
Less educated.
Limited job prospects. Oof.
Does big tobacco see heroes or dollar signs? Know the truth, spread the truth.
Truth has saved more than 1 million lives and enlisted a new generation to help finish it.
So hopefully you can see the strategy come through. We're talking about things that you care about, and we're tethering them back to things that we care about. We also are very cognizant that we're building a brand. So go back to the example that we gave from the tobacco industry. We're going head to head and we're competing for market share. What you don't see is C. Everett Koop, as well-meaning as he is, just touting out the facts. It's how do we connect the dots. And did you know there were such things as cat influencers? It's just not people influencers. It's an amazing world we live in. We're very proud of the fact we saved over 1 million lives, a conservative effort there. Very, very proud of the work. We took literally an afternoon to do some fist bumping, and then we got on to what do we do next. And so that's where we are today. We're at Act 3. Literally worked on it this morning. I'm working on it this evening of what do we do. We have this unique opportunity or challenge where the smoking rate is dropping down to a very, very low number where, God willing, I'll be out of a job. As we open up the aperture a little bit, though, we see that there are pockets of smoking that are still very, very hard for us to move in particular regions of the country or particular demographics. We're looking at that as potentially a place where we focus. We're also looking at other issues that commingle with smoking, and you can't get very far down that pipeline without talking about opioids. And while every smoker is not an opioid addict, almost every single opioid addict is a smoker. It's raging through communities. You know this better than I do. And we are actively pursuing a platform where Truth can expand its messaging to talk about opioids. And we're going to be launching, I think, some pilot work in the spring. We're super excited about this. The brand has power. The brand has a platform. The brand has relevancy. And we think we can make a dent in this epidemic. If we think about the issue holistically, that's another talking or a takeaway for you, is what other issues does your brand or does your issue link up well with, and how do you think about that so it's more relevant for the consumer? So really quick, because I'm out of time, a few lessons learned. Harness the momentum. You can be the guy pushing a rock up a hill, but I'm just here to tell you, like, it's a lot of energy for very little movement. Look for the momentum. And then I would also say shape the narrative. What we don't say is, hey, kids, don't smoke. We start a lot further upstream to identify what are the decisions that give you permission to try smoking, and how do we attack that sort of decision-making tree a little further upstream. I never say don't smoke. That's obvious. I'm not going to smoke. But FOMO, I can play into FOMO. I can play into your love of cat videos. You can do the exact same thing. We have a relentless focus on the consumer. I can't tell you how many times I sit in front of my board and they say, it's the governor of Rhode Island, it's the attorney general of Iowa, very, very senior people, and they go, I don't get it. And we say, it's not for you. Do you trust that we've done the research? I do. Let us do our thing. And they get out of the way. Be focused on the consumer. Resist your urge to be the armchair quarterback on every decision being made. Do what is right for the consumer. And then the last point is we are so outcome driven. You can't know if you're going to have success if you don't know where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish. I have not even talked about the longitudinal cohort, all of those things, which I know we have the ability to do because of our size and scale. But the important point here is before you start to talk about the communication, develop the communication, know who you're talking to, know what you want to achieve, put whatever triggers you can in place so you know when you get there. So I hope that helps a little bit. This has been incredibly fun and rewarding. Thank you guys very much for the time and support. That was awesome.
I love you so much.
Thank you
oh my
so
God.
much.
Eric Ashe! This dovetails nicely into our next speaker, who is going to talk about craftivism, and you can't craft if you have a cigarette in your hand. See how I did that? I'm like magic. I had a really nice chat with Sarah Corbett, who's coming out, who is somebody who, like, was like, we were talking about craftivism, did I just say craftivism? I did not mean to. Craftivism. And it was like, what do you want me to say? And she's like, you know, one thing I want people to know is that it's not, I'm just not sitting around knitting. Like, I'm not the pussy hat person. And I was like, got it. Not the pussy hat person. And so she has a really great TED Talk that you have to see that says activism needs more introverts. And watch it, because when we talk about craft, and I'm going to let her go on and on, like really break down what craftivism is. But if any of you have ever incorporated actual tangible crafting into your activism, it's amazing. And nobody does it better than this woman who is an award-winning campaigner. And within her crafting, she's going to explain to you this way of a gentle activism that's pretty astounding. Also, I'm really psyched because she's coming out to our shared inspiration, Kathleen Hanna. So please welcome to the stage, Sarah Corbett!
I just want us to carry on dancing to that song and not listen to me. This is weird. Oh, it's the middle one. All right. So I'm Sarah. And when people ask me what I do, and I say I'm a craftivist, I do activism through handicraft. The normal response is, oh, that sounds fun. Yeah. Oh, that sounds lovely. I'll do that. And my response inside, hidden, deep underneath a smile, is pure frustration. Because I think craftivism can be so much more than fun. It can be much more fulfilling. It can change our worlds personally, and it can change our world politically and structurally. And by just seeing it as fun, I think could stop people thinking about how it could actually be more than fun and help our activism and be one of the many tools in the activism toolkit that we can use to improve our world. There's lots of forms of craftivism out there. If you Google it, I always think it's a bit like thinking about punk music. There's so many different punk bands out there, from the Ramones to the Sex Pistols to the Talking Heads to Blondie. All sound completely different if you Google craftivism. There's so many different approaches. My approach I call gentle protest. That's what I call it. And I don't mean gentle as in passive or weak. I'm talking about gentle as in compassionate, carefully done with strategy, with consideration, with that compassion. And I think that's much harder to do, having that self-control and doing activism in a loving way than just doing it in a fun, maybe shallow, maybe aggressive way. I run the Craftivist Collective. These little labels that people sew on their craftivism kits says made with courage and care, which is a bit of a nudge to my craftivists to say, do this courageously, speak out, which is scary and uncomfortable, but do it carefully. Do it with a clear strategy, a clear objective, figure out who your targets are, who are you trying to engage, who has the power, who doesn't, who are the influencers, who do these power holders listen to. All of that stuff means that it's not always fun, but our motive shouldn't be fun. Our motive should be, how can we help make our world more beautiful, kind, and just for everyone? How can we help everyone fulfill their potential and help the planet fulfill its potential and eradicate these structures that oppress us and the planet itself? So my approach is that gentle protest. I'm not a crafter, never went to art school, I learned to craft from YouTube, so I'm pretty basic, but I am an activist, and I've been an activist since I was 3. That little child with a mullet. That's me. My mum used to cut my hair because we were on a budget. I'll never forgive her. This is me. This is me with my local community standing outside social housing for families on the top of our road where I grew up in West Everton, a very low-income area. And you can see the banner behind it. And we squatted to save social housing that were going to be demolished to build a park that no one wanted. And if anyone knows low-income areas, you know that to build a park just eradicates generations of families that are close-knit, and it makes an area much more unsafe. We won that campaign. So I grew up in an area with my dad as the local vicar, my mum as a nurse, then a full-time mum of 3 under the age of 5, living on the 14th floor of a tower block, which nearly made her have a mental breakdown on a budget as well. And grew up seeing where my community were campaigning on local, national and international issues, where we won, where we lost, and how important strategy was, but also how important love and humility and listening to people we disagree with and serving the cause and not just aiming for our own ways of having fun. And actually I think it can be bad taste sometimes if we're having fun when we're challenging structures that are making people suffer. I think it can it makes me a bit uncomfortable. There's 3 ways that I think craft, there's lots more, but I'm going to talk about 3 ways that I think craft can be more than fun. And the first one is that it can really help with critical thinking, which isn't always that fun, if we're honest. It means your brain hurts a little bit. And craft is really good because it's often repetitive actions that I use to get people to use that repetitive action to meditate, to calm their minds from being super angry, calm them down to being less foggy and more focused on what am I doing? Where can I use my power? Where's my influence? What can I do as an effective activist? And using the process of craft, which is a very comforting thing to do when you feel completely disempowered in the messy world and think, what can little old me do? Every stitch shows that you're doing something. It's very empowering. It's good for mental health. It's good for burnt out activists. And it really gives you that comforting space to ask yourself uncomfortable questions. And my form of craftivism, I always have craft-a-thought questions with every different project, depending on what the project's for. It'll have questions like, what are your values and how do you thread them through what you do as a consumer, as a constituent, as a citizen? Pretty juicy, uncomfortable questions, but you've got the time and the process of doing that stitching to focus your mind and go, yeah, am I practicing what I'm preaching, or am I just telling other people to do it? Or if you're making something for a power holder, how can it engage them rather than it be all about you? Or if you're making something for the public, what do you want the public to do once they've seen your piece of craftivism? Is it going to empower them with a call to action? Or is it going to overwhelm them where they go, I don't know what to do about this scary fact that you've just given me? Or this is so vague, I don't quite know what you're asking. So it's all about critical thinking for the process. And I think it's a wasted opportunity if we don't have those big juicy questions to meditate on our own or in a group. And group crafting is incredible because, as you can see here, you don't need eye contact with people, which is very different to an activism meeting where it's quite scary to disagree with someone with eye contact, or to have a silence where people reflect and don't just go, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Let's do it now, and leave. It creates a space for personal craft of thoughts, but also for difficult discussions with each other. You can listen to people you disagree with without looking at them, and without looking at them you can say, hang on a minute, tell me a bit more about why you've come to that decision. I'm not sure I agree. One of the quotes that I love in my book from a craftivist, and I didn't tell her to write it, don't worry, it's a real one, and she says, the first 10 minutes, I just felt frustrated at my terrible handiwork. I had to unpick my terrible stitching and start from scratch. But having to go back and start from scratch was the most important moment. It made me stop. It made me really stop and think about what I was doing. In other words, it allowed me to be a fuller me, as it didn't stop my critical thinking to function. If anything, it made my brain work better. It paced it, leaving space for even more connection. And so much of our activism is quick, transactional, quick responses. We need sometimes to do slow activism alongside it. For me, I talk about gentle protest as craftivism, and one of the hardest things, which it's so much more fun probably to crochet a voodoo doll of your favorite Prime Minister or President and send it to their office. It's fun. It would get more likes on Instagram. It would make you feel fun in the short term. But is it effective or is it harmful? It's not effective. You're just preaching to the converted. And it's harmful because all it is creating more division, which is not helpful for anyone, and creating more hate. So I get people to make gifts for people they disagree with. I get them to make gifts for board members, for politicians, for influential people, to say, make them a bespoke gift for them that they will cherish, but that will encourage them to do their job in the best way. And one example is that I was asked by Share Action, that does shareholder activism. Their CEO said that they'd been trying for 3 years to get the biggest retail company in the UK to be a living wage employer. She said for 3 years they tried everything and got nowhere. She'd read my little book and said, it's so weird, you've got 5 weeks before the AGM of the company, can you do something? So I thought, yeah, I'm not going to try and get every craftivist in the country or the world to do stuff and do a giant quilt and something big and brash. I'm going to ask 14 craftivists from across the UK that are loyal customers of their core base for this shop, because they're going to listen to their customers, not to people that don't look like their customers. And I'm going to give them a board member each, and I'm going to tell them to Google the fuck out of their board member and find out what colours they wear, what old jobs they used to have, are they a trustee of anywhere, what are their passions, are they shy, are they extrovert, are they flamboyant, are they, you know, timid, what is it about them, and can you make them a handkerchief bought from that company to show that we weren't boycotting them, we were customers, and stitch a message saying, don't blow it, use your power for good. You've got a difficult job, but a powerful job, and we want you to do the best job you can. And really make that hanky something that they'd like, not something that you'd like. You might like pink, but if they don't like pink, don't make it pink. Don't do capital letters and exclamation marks telling them what to do. Use it as an encouraging tool. And then write a handwritten letter to go alongside it saying, while I was making your gift for X amount of hours, I was thinking about how impressive it is that you've got this job, how much power you have, but also how much responsibility. And I was shocked that you don't pay the living wage. We love your staff. It makes sense to pay them the living wage, but it also makes business sense with staff retention, with lots of other reasons. So a very robust argument that was emotive, but intelligent. And we hand-delivered them in a very humble way, which again, isn't that fun? It would be much more fun to throw it in their faces and have a giggle. But we went, you have the power, we've made you these handkerchiefs, and here are some of the examples. And we had people who stitched flowers on for one board member who was a trustee of Kew Gardens, which is an amazing place in the UK. One loved music, so he had music notes all over his handkerchief. And within 10 months, we not only got the meeting that we asked for, we got many more meetings. We had lots of boring meetings with them. And within 10 months, they announced they were paying the living wage to 50,000 staff. And the chair of the board told me very quietly that the next year when we went back to the AGM to say thank you, not to say well done us, we went back to say well done board members, that was amazing, but we want you to be accredited living wage employers now, which is a little bit more difficult to get them to do. But the chair of the board told me very quietly afterwards that this campaign had more engagement than any other campaign that they'd ever seen. They constantly referred to their hankies when they met, even if the living wage wasn't on their agenda, and he really thanked us for that, which is quite incredible since they'd said no for 3 years to the living wage. So it's about that humble activism where it's strategic, it's about them, it's not about you, but that's much more fulfilling than quick fun. And the third one is craftivism can be really good to intrigue people. There's lots of other forms of activism out there, and in my work, I never try and compete with it. I try and complement other forms of activism and see craftivism as one jigsaw piece in the jigsaw puzzle and where we can help other campaigns or fill gaps where lots of activism tools aren't helping. So Fashion Revolution, for example, incredible NGO that work on improving the fashion industry, and they work online. And I thought, we should do some offline stuff. I love Fashion Revolution, but how do we engage people that love fashion, buy in cheap fast fashion stores? How do we engage them to intrigue them, not demonize them or tell them that they're not allowed to love fashion anymore, but how do we get them to think about who made their clothes? So I get people to shop drop mini fashion statements. So it's the opposite of shoplifting. You shop drop them. You shop drop them in unethical shops that you think could improve. You just go into a shop with a handful in your pocket and you drop them in shirt pockets, in bag pockets, and then when people find them, you can see on it, it says, please open me, all in lowercase with a smiley face and a kiss, so overly kitsch. It's got purple ribbon because purple is seen as a luxury colour for us in our culture and our behaviour, so it's seen as more luxurious than something cheap. It has embossed scissors on it, so the texture, using 2 or more sensors make us remember things more, so you want to touch it. And it doesn't say what it's about, so you as the public have to decide if you're going to open it. And if you decide to open it, you're more likely to have an open mind and an open heart than if something's forced in your face. And it'll say a message in it like, who made your clothes? Were they made with joy or were they made with pain? What values are threaded throughout this item? And then it has @FashRev at the bottom, so you've got more information if you want to decide to go and find out more info. And people make them and we shop drop them. And it's not about us, and it doesn't say Craftivist Collective on it anywhere, but as well as engaging the public, it means we had media all over the world last year during London Fashion Week and Paris Fashion Week saying, are you going to find any of these in your pockets? So we got a message out there that was intriguing, that was positive, that made people curious, but hopefully also lingered in their minds, which was strategic and fun in some ways, but much more than fun. I think it could actually help fulfill us to be that change we want to see in the world. Thank you very much. I went over.
I love that. Oh my God, good morning so far, right? Yeah. You know, I just want to say one thing too. Like, I use baking as a way. We forget about process a lot, which is why I think we lose a lot of battles. Like, when people want to have healthcare now, or why does this take so long? Crafting and baking are reintroductions to folks of that things take time and process is really important. So take how you're going to do it out and just re-giving people ways to be patient and learn process, I think is super important. So I love that. Also, we have recess right now. It's very exciting. So you know the drill. There's going to be people outside showing you who's going to be speaking and where. If you wanted to go to Tom Latches, it was scheduled for Maud, but it's going to be downstairs in the Frank Lounge where we had coffee and cookies yesterday, so know that. People are outside. I hope you looked at your things to see where you're going and what the talks are. Go out, join a talk, be back here at 11:30. What time? 11:30. I think you're awesome and beautiful, and I wish I was all of you. So we'll see you back here at 11:30.